Welcome to Module 5, What It Is Like to Adopt a Child. This module is presented and created by coaches at Growing Intentional Families Together to help you grow happier and healthier adopted families. Hello, my name is Sharon Butler Abaze, the adoption coach who will be guiding you through this module. I was an infant adopted with same-race parents. I have lived the adoption experience and became certified as an adoption coach because of my interest in supporting the adoptees' experience by educating the adopted parents. I know that I am not the first to say that if you want to understand an adoption, talk to an adult adoptee. We'll be going through this module, understanding your adopted child together. Research over the recent decades has greatly enhanced the understanding of adoptees, their needs, and how to parent well. One significant shift has been emphasizing the 7 core issues of adoption. Sharon Russia and Allison Davis Maxon recently wrote an entire book on the topic. It is listed in the references for this module. These 7 factors will influence your child's thinking, behaving, emotions, and beliefs about themselves. By familiarizing yourself with these concepts, you will understand your child better, and your support will be more effective at meeting their needs. We will touch on 3 specifically today: loss, rejection, guilt, and shame. Fear of rejection refers not only to the universal aversion to being rejected and left out or ostracized. For adoptees, it goes deeper. Since they have already experienced one core rejection when they were separated with their birth parents, this separation caused them to be severed and lose their family. We find that adoptees have a highly tuned urge to ensure that they avoid future rejections. Often, this shows up in a chameleon-like approach to relationships in which the adoptee strives to identify what they think the other person wants them to do or be. They sacrifice their genuine selves to avert the risk of rejection. By the way, this strategy is not necessarily conscious. Frequently, adoptees will bail from a relationship at the first hint of rejection. Their thinking is that it is better to lose a salvageable relationship than to risk the pain of rejection. They prefer to do the rejecting than be the person getting rejected. Here's another example. Nobody likes to be the last one picked for a team in the school or at the office. For adoptees, this aversion is even more intense. In a parent-child relationship, the fear of being rejected by their adoptive family, just as their birth family left them, is a constant influence. When adopted parents know this factor, they can parent with sensitivity and empathy. Guilt. A child internalizes thoughts: I must have done something to cause my adoption. It's all my fault. Shame leads to thoughts like, people think less of me because I'm adopted. It means I'm not as good as others. Children don't have the capacity in their cognitive thinking to grasp the uncanny situation they're experiencing during adoption. The frontal lobe has not matured, and they can't even calculate the activity the amygdala is doing within its limited toolbox to assess exposure to complex problems they encounter. For instance, infants cry. They learn that their cry brings comfort and nutrition. As one matures, we can speak to express a hunger for attention. Once a child knows they're adopted, crying or expression cannot fill that gap of fear or shame or grief. Adoptees feel discomfort without an explanation and may not be aware of the disconnect the adoption completed. Once the adoption status is explained, the mind turns inward to assign self incrimination because they cannot find an external resource to fill the void and find relief. No matter how fantastic the adoptive family is or how well they can provide for the child, losing their family is painful for the adoptee. For the length of their life, they will wrestle with the question like, why wasn't I important enough for them to move heaven and earth to keep me? Or what was wrong with me and why wasn't I good enough? Adult adoptees tell us that from their perspective, their birth parents' decision to place them feels deeply personal and profoundly rejecting. This response is true, even if you can agree that the reasons were compelling. Being separated from your birth family still hurts. Every adoption originates in loss, whether a child joins you on the day of their birth or sometime afterward. First, the child is separated from the birth family, then they gain their adopted family. First the loss, then the gain. The primary functional element in adoption is loss. It's a challenge to understand how this might impact the child. I want to list some of the issues that the child will face to help you understand their experience. The loss of health history will influence their knowledge of self and genetic mirroring. Some examples of this are their personality, laugh, gait, and other resemblances they've acquired through genetics. Once the generational line has been disrupted by loss, their loss of father, mother, extended family, knowledge of self, genetic mirroring, cultural language, and a self sense of belonging. Can you see how this lack of insight may influence your child's vision of what does not fit their conscious and unconscious expectations? Ambiguous loss is loss without closure or ending. According to therapist Dr. Pauline Boss, incomplete or uncertain loss, not certain about the person's absence or presence, where family members perceive someone to be physically absent but psychologically present, or psychologically absent and physically present, according to Pauline Boss. Actually, I've heard it stated several times that losing a person through death may be easier because of its finality. Part of life's challenges for the adoptee is figuring out how to blend their dual heritage into a healthy and cohesive sense of self. Aspects of their natural genetic blend with the influence of their nurturing by their adopted parents. This is not static. It changes over time and by specific circumstances. The adoptee is tasked with answering the question, who am I? Most adoptees had no say in deciding if they wanted to be adopted. Consequently, they must control nearly everything in their lives and ensure they never get rejected again. This is a quote from cradle.org. As unnamed, unacknowledged, and ungrieved losses can create intense feelings of powerlessness and loss of control. For adoptees, they easily lose loss of control that moved them from one family tree to another, resulted in ultimate loss of power and control. Human beings need to feel in control to feel secure. The ultimate goal is mastery, which is regaining power and control over one's life. Feeling empowered always allows a person to affect others, feel that they have authority, and rights. Be hopeful and create change. The achievement of mastery in various aspects of one's life is a process, a journey which includes adapting and learning, self awareness, and forgiving. Close quote. Feeling in control provides a sense of safety, security, and mastery over one's life, but adoption, for everyone, is marked by loss of control. Adoptees do not choose to lose their birth families, or in many cases, do not participate in an adoption plan. Some older children may choose whether to be adopted, but the circumstances leading to the option are out of their control. Birth parents may feel like adoption is their only choice, following an unintended pregnancy, or it may be court mandated after a child is placed in foster care. They lose control over how their child is raised. Adopted parents often face lifelong time frames, unexpected challenges, and delays while waiting for a referral or placement or finalization. They all navigate unknowns about the child's history, including incomplete information about their emotional and developmental needs. Also, their physical needs are not necessarily outlined clearly. Adults and children commonly try to regain control by controlling other areas in their lives. The following can reduce the power of control issues in one life's when identity, what pushes your buttons, and in what situations you find yourself trying to exert control. When you identify that, it really helps. Explore opportunities for choices you can control and keep a flexible agenda. Nurture a talent or determination to do what makes you and your child feel productive and proud. Feeling success in one area can ease the urgency to feel control over everything. You will note that there will be several links to PDFs on resources in and on our resource page. When adoptive parents understand that a need for control is a recognized priority for most adopted persons, parents can have more empathy. The awareness helps parents respond to with insight and understanding. Maximize their child's opportunity to have control whenever possible so that the kids are less resistant when parents need to manage situations that require parenting. Intimacy. High walls controlling whom they let in. They're, they've experienced a huge loss, and to avoid experiencing another loss, minor or major, they will often resist a relationship and or end a relationship out of an excuse of caution or fear. Our culture's dominant understanding of adoption is that it is a win-win for all involved, especially for the adoptee. The presupposition is that the adopted family is probably financially secure and providing a comfortable life for the child. While adoptees often benefit from being raised in a greater affluence, this elevation in economic status comes at a cost to them, the loss of their place in their ancestral line. We must never lose sight of this significant loss. Assuming that the adoptee's life is better than it would be if they remained in their birth parents' families, assumes that the adoption was a complete match in which the adoptee's needs were all met. Sadly, this is not always the case. In fact, sometimes the adopted families are neglectful, disconnected, or abusive. Assuming a child's adoptive life provided a better life than their birth parent could provide also overlooks the possibility that the difficult circumstances in which the birth mother and father found themselves might not have remained permanent. Given enough support, they may have been able to overcome their limitations and safely and securely parent their child. If that had occurred, the child would never have experienced separation and loss of their family lineage. The only guarantee that can be assumed in that adoption provides a different life. Hopefully, it's a better one, but it's not always the case. We experience things primarily from our perspectives and through the filter that we have, along with our history. It benefits our relationships in which we can also intentionally try to understand other people's perspectives and points of view. Imagine for a moment that you're a woman who decided to make an adoption plan for her child. Consider all the reasons that may have compelled her to arrive at this decision, like finances, resources, maybe job or health. Now ponder the reasons that brought you to want to adopt a child. Things like infertility, health issues, wanting to provide a family for a child who needs one. Now finally, imagine what it is like to be a child who has had the experience the loss of their first family, their place in the flow of their ancestral generations, and feel the pain of rejection, often compounded by the lack of information about their lives and their first family. All these perspectives are true at the same time. Our kids' lives begin before they arrive in our home. This is especially germane to the understanding of the child placed up for adoption. Indeed, their prenatal experience is a highly stressed pre-birth environment. They also experience a stress of relinquishment from their family of origin, and they're trying to figure out how to fit in and flourish in a new family. This struggle occurs at pre-verbal sensory level for the youngest adoptees. Because they have not yet mastered language, that's a lot of emotional and physical weight for them to carry on their shoulders. And for the birth mother, we must not lose sight that our joy is rooted in their heartbreak. If you lost a spouse and remarried, people would never say, "You're so lucky your first husband or wife died because your new spouse is so much better. Aren't you grateful for the first partner's death?" This idea is absurd, yet adoptees constantly hear this type of comment. It also does not consider that the adoptive parents gained as much as their child. They get to become parents and enjoy all the pleasures and challenges that accompany that responsibility. Their familiar lineage is continued. They finally can join with family and friends as equals, as people raising children, swapping stories, bragging, and sometimes even complaining about the challenges of a daily life. Parents are no longer looking from the outside in. Please take a moment to pause and gain access to your emotional status. Breathe in and read the first line from the "You are this" side. Now breathe out and read from the other side of the column. Did you feel a shift in your being? This poem offers another way of appreciating the both and that exists in adoptive families and their relationships. The dualities coexist. The positive aspects do not cancel out the painful ones. The adoptees feel the entirety of these emotions all the time. Gains in adoption coexist with losses. They do not erase or fix their limitations. If you've done your due diligence and determined, to the best of your knowledge, that the child indeed requires a home, the circumstances requiring surrounding relinquishment were such that the adoption was the best possible option for the birth mother at the time, you know you have done your best. Being a part of a child's life, seeing them reach out, grow, have relationships, change, and then become independent feels fantastic. Adopted parents who have done the work to open their hearts and home to a child gain a profound satisfaction, especially when they witness their child take off to fly. There's much to go through to get to that point, and to know you've honored the child you adopted. It will likely surprise you to learn that infants and toddlers experience profound grief, just like children adopted at older ages. Grief in infants can be expressed in many ways: prolonged crying, irritability, gaze aversion, resistance to comforting, aversions to touch, poor appetite, excessive sleeping, muscle tension, disengaged, stares into space, and too good or undemanding attention are some of the experiences adoptive parents observed. Children are not blank slates. First off, they have a history, specifically their experiences before joining your family. For some adoptees, this refers only to their prenatal experience. For others, it relates to the days, weeks, and months or years that precede their adoption. Second, they have the programming of their DNA. For example, introvert versus extrovert, athlete versus sedentary, etc. These tendencies are just a tiny example of what preferences the child can align with and or prefer. You will need to address your expectations versus reality to understand the degree of influence you actually have. We introduced the concept of Ghost Kingdom in Module 1. Let's take a deeper look to see specifically what the adoptee's point of view might be. They live with their ghost 24/7. It's all the time, even if they don't realize it and make a verbal comment about their thoughts. It's on their mind, and it's pretty consistent. Adoptees' ghosts include birth mother, birth father, birth grandparents, and siblings. Ideas can be triggering, and thoughts can take them down a path that they don't expect. My personal experience entails a great deal of creativity, I'll call it, with my imagination. As an adoptee, I was around 13 or so, and my thoughts would carry me to places that you can't even imagine. I would see situations that I would like to have happened compared to what had actually happened. And I can recall being a young adult and looking around to look for similarities and see things in people's faces that I felt I might identify with. And so I had this occasion to be in a grocery store, and I came across this lady who I felt looked like me. And I remembered going home so quickly. I was in a hurry to get home because I had to get to the mirror in the bathroom and be able to sit there and just look in the mirror and see how I looked in comparison to this person I just saw. I came out of the restroom and told my mom about my experience, and she sort of dismissed it. She didn't think it was that significant. And so basically, my feelings were not validated, and it was hard for me to overcome that for a little bit. I just recall going back into the restroom and staying there for a number of hours, just thinking, I know I could know that person. So it's a ghost kingdom for a lot of adoptees, and it's not an easy thing to go through. Celebrations, especially those connected to family milestones, can evoke a mixed emotional response in adopted children. They may feel excited and eager simultaneously, feel sadness and grief regarding their absent birth family. If they never lived with birth family, they may still wonder what it might be like to live with them and celebrating with them. How would you transition your child through this difficult period? Food, activities? What would you use to help your child connect with their internal idea of who they are? If you if they were adopted after infancy, they may remember and miss the treasured memories. They may long for familiar traditions, foods, and experiences, and they may grieve the absence of relatives and friends. And for children who were adopted, birthdays carry a mixed message. Their birthday naturally reminds them of the separation from their birth mother. Along with festivities, unsettled, sad, angry feelings might coexist and overwhelm them. Some of these coexisting conflicting feelings may be somatic and unconscious and will show up through behavior like melting down in the middle of the celebration. This can lead to disconnection and frustration for both the child and the parents. Parents may feel unappreciated, and the kids will feel overwhelmed or unseen. When adopted parents are educated on these kinds of trauma adversities, which means time specific anniversaries of traumatic events, they can and respond with empathy, skill, instead of irritation and disappointment. Knowing that birthdays are often when adoptive families feel the sting of adoption complexity, to experience the both and syndrome, enable parents, adoptive parents, to see the behavior as an indication that the child needs support. It means parents can feel empathy instead of anger because they realize the factors driving the behavior are unintended. Both parent and child benefit from these awarenesses. This is what our adoption attunement parenting practices are all about. When you imagine your child's arrival, it was likely with delight. You probably anticipated celebrating this day every year as a kind of second birthday, the day your life began together. However, it is helpful to consider that the way you feel, unequivocally joyful, will differ will differ from how your child feels. Excuse me. Their emotions are likely to be mixed. This is another example of both and adoption. A blog written by one of our coaches titled Dear Abby, We Need to Get Rid of Gotcha Day discusses why adoptive parents may not want to celebrate the anniversary of their child's arrival or adoption. First, Gotcha focuses on the parental experience instead of the child. Second, it objectifies a child like a prized toy that was finally acquired. And third, gotcha is often used to indicate victory or advantage over another person. Adoption is a life altering experience for the child. Gotcha frames it as a negative or dispersonalizing situation. There are better foundations for building a family, and it often certainly differs from what this mom intended. Alternatives to gotcha, a language adjustment can help. Some more suitable titles are Arrival Day, Homecoming, Family Day, or Johnny Day. There are all better choices because they affirm relationships centered on the child's experience. Remember, there are two sides to this day: the happy part about joining a permanent, loving family, and the sad part about losing the family of birth. Be prepared for your child to feel mixed emotions. His attitude towards this day may evolve once he understands how adoption delivered losses and gains. Some kids want to commemorate the day, and others do not. For those whose experiences associated with this day, parents must be respectful to their emotions and limit the celebration to an internal and personal event. None of us wants to extract our enjoyment out of the child's expense. Even if adopted your child, Even if you adopted your child as an infant, ask him if he wishes to celebrate the day that he became a part of the family. Family membership is a high stakes game for adoptees. Adoptees often stifle their feelings and inclinations without explicit permission, express thought and emotion. They fear that they'll be less than perfect. Their adoptive families will reject them, just like their birth mother did. Adoption realigns families in a profound and abiding way. Our language choices must honor our sacred promise to build our family on love and respect. We must commit to communication that encourages honesty and embraces the complex duality of adoption. When children get that, we are willing to see the totality of who they are, what they think, and how they feel. They'll be drawn to harbor and allow the acceptance that we are offering. This is love, dear Abby. This is a gift to family. Adoption is a challenging time for young people. The significant changes in their body can make them feel like they no longer know who they are. They try on new personas, sample hobbies and sports, and other interests to determine what resonates with them. Adolescents face a even more complicated task because they must learn how to braid components from their birth and adoptive families together. This is also when they feel the scope of their adoption connected losses. Now they seek nuanced answers and lots of information because the simple explanations of early childhood no longer satisfy them. Loss is a big component of adoption, and identity follows just a few feet behind. I was raised in a closed adoption. My adoptive mom always said I had an active imagination. So when I told her I'd seen a lady who looked like me, I was 13 at the time, she ignored my curiosity and mentioned that creativity was a great skill. I did not respond because I wanted to remember who the person I encountered resembled. She didn't understand the longing I experienced. I felt confused and unseen. I retreated to the bathroom to look in the mirror for several hours to identify similarities between the woman I had seen and myself. In addition, the letter on this page is a heartwarming note written by the son of an adopted parent within our firm. Genealogy is the second most popular hobby in the United States. This normal human need for knowledge about who one is and the people from whom one ascended is not extinguished by adoption. So it is reasonable that adoptees want to know more about their ancestry. This also They also want to know things like who took care of them during the first time after they were born and they eventually joined the adoptive family they're in currently. Where were they? What was it like? Etc. And the list goes on with questions. And once they reach adulthood, they want to access their records and original birth certificates. Two of the most significant things your child needs from you are roots and wings. Strong roots help them flourish and feel grounded and steady. Every strand of an adoptee story matters. They do their best when they feel anchored in all of their family. Help your child grow wings so they can become a fledge, and so they can fledge from the family nest out into the world, capable and confident, steadied by the love of family. Accepting them for whom they are meant to be by nurturing their genuine talents and aptitudes. Accepting them by loving the child before you versus pursuing them to become someone that they're not. Accepting them helps your child to grow capable, confident, and steadily by the love of family. Andrew Solomon wrote in his book, Far from the Tree: Parents and Children and the Search for Identity, where he quotes the words of Jim Singular on page 37, a prominent activism autism individual. And I quote, when parents say, I wish my child did not have autism, what they're really saying is, I wish the child I have did not exist, and I had a different non autistic child instead. Wait, could you read that again? This is what we hear when you pray for a cure, that your fondest wish for us is that someday we will cease to be strangers and love can move in behind our faces. End of quote. It's very extreme point of view, but it points out the reality that people engage with life they have, and they don't want to be cured or changed or eliminated. They want to be whomever they've come to be. Close quote. Imagine the quote is about an adoptee who wants to be accepted for who they are. Here are a few lines from a blog. How often have you felt less than in your life? Remember the shame of not measuring up to your parental expectations? How often, how intentional rather, are you in avoiding this painful interaction with your children? In what way are you telegraphing expectations to your child? Are they based on authenticity, on the child's capabilities and identity? End of blog quote. You can find this blog in the resources section of this particular module. When you accept your child as themselves, you can help them feel comfortable, capable, and confident. Loyalty is a powerful force in an adoptive family. Most adoptees feel a need to be loyal to their adoptive parents. Adult adoptees who have closed adoptions act frequently held off, looking for reconnection to their birth families until the adoptive parents have died. I had this experience because I did not reach out to my birth parents until several years after my adoptive parents passed. This meant we suppressed a primal need for information and connection at the high emotional cost of themselves, out of loyalty to the adoptive parents. Some adoptive parents may send subtle messages that the child should feel exclusive loyalty to the adoptive parents. Sadly, this expectation may even be overt or consistently presented. When this happens, the child feels torn, pulled in two directions, sometimes to the breaking point. Requiring 100% loyalty to adoptive family and ignoring and disparaging the birth family hurts the child. Whether or not they have open contact, birth parents are a part of the thoughts, biology, and aptitudes of the adopted child. This locks the child in a bit of a bind because he knows that during their lives they depend upon the adopted parents for food, shelter, medical care, education, affection, and safety. So avoiding rejection from the adopted family feels like a matter of survival. Adopted parents can hold both parents as allies and loving the same child. Share an appreciation for the birth parents' role in the child's life. The child benefits. In fact, the entire family benefits. A child can never have too many people who love him. Loyalty issues can also occur around race, culture, and ethnicity. Becoming part of a new racial community, parents and the rest of the family also do some heavy lifting of experiencing being a minority by interracial adoption, post-racial adoption, or transracial adoption. This intersection in adoption is highly confusing to the adoptee. I was raised in the same race family, but we lived in an all-white community. I share the experiences written by this anonymous adoptee writer, and I quote, "Understand that we are exhausted from being predominantly white spaces. Our home, extended family gatherings, our communities, our schools, the regions where we live, and then add to that the political and cultural climate we live in. The microaggressions, the covert and overt racism, the gaslighting and dismissal of our feelings, and more. And sometimes we internalize it all. With this all said, we need safe spaces, spaces where we are understood, listened to, validated, and affirmed. Those spaces may be all black spaces, like HBCUs, transracial adoptee groups, or the presence of blackness that makes us feel a bit more like our authentic selves." Close quote. Try to imagine a child has experience with the elements of race as an adoptee. It's overwhelming. Adopted parents will require open minds and hearts with bravery to allow the first families to be present in their child's lives. Let's look at secrecy from the perspective of the child. Even if something remains a secret to the child until adulthood, the child will still feel the influence of the secret. They will sense its presence like a stone beneath the water's surface. They will perceive something is off and doesn't quite add up. And if they share their concerns with their parents and they blow it off and or deny it, they will also feel the weight of the deception. There have been instances with adopted parents withholding information or items and keepsakes from the birth family. It's important to mention that information should be shared with the adoptee at age appropriate times to avoid overwhelming the child. Independent from secrecy within a home, there are policies and provisions apparent within the governmental statutes which limit information. For example, open birth certificates are still withheld in 18 states, and 21 states have compromise restriction, and only 12, mind you, allow access to the birth records of the adoptee. The intangible ties rooted in biological relationships are a permanent force in the adoptee's life. Adoptive parents serve their children best when they honor, value, and nurture that connection for the sake of the child. Both their birth and adoptive families are forever a part of their lives. Now let's discuss the adoptee's perspective on the impact of adoption. The complexities of adoption presented during this module have provided an opportunity to recognize the profound emotional barriers that, over time, can be overcome. Looking back at the confused child I could not foresee the adult I would become. It has been difficult, and I am the first to admit that my foundation was flawed. Reviewing this module with you has been somewhat triggering for me, mostly because as a child I had no information about my identity outside of our adoptive home, where everyone looked and behaved differently. I did not know where I came from, who I resembled, and what skills or behaviors we shared because of my closed adoption. Going through this with you has helped me to look at my childhood experiences with adult vision. I felt ignored as a child, and most of my childhood I lived through life rejecting new experiences because I harbored feelings of self incrimination. I felt uncomfortable with compliments and other efforts to look deeper as and observe my emotional unsettling. So I approached their efforts with mistrust. I tried overcompensating behaviors through laughter, telling jokes, and being generally obnoxious because I wanted to hide the pain and loss that I experienced. It was easier to overlook my needs because I learned over time that I was not good enough to have meaningful relationships with others. I also became a peacemaker in our family. The goal was to help others so that they would not experience the hurt and self incrimination I experienced on a daily basis. Some of my experience are to help parents see how adoptees may feel even when you're doing your best to avoid internal emotional trauma caused by adoption. The other aspect is to help you understand the fragility the child you adopt carries with them, and that it is an emotional battle that some adoptees cannot conquer. Now, let's begin to look at some important conversational questions you may want to have with your partner, spouse, or other significant person that will be involved with you in this adoption process. After completing the modules, they ask, what are you thinking about most? It might be helpful to share your thoughts after writing them down with your partner so that you can see where you're both coming from and compare notes. The next question is, what aspect of this module surprised you and why? There's so much here. It's a great nugget to take away to understand some things that you might not have been expecting. And finally, how will you put what you've learned in this module into action? Wow, that's a big one, isn't it? It's hard to assess after reading through everything what is most important. So take some time with that one and try to figure out what works. We have some closing thoughts to share with you now that you've completed everything so that we can point out some of the things that we thought might be important. Coach Sally says, give priority to your child's experiences of life over your experiences of life. Be By doing so, you can increase your empathy, love, and care for your child. Sharon Obaze says, be mindful of your approach to the adopted child. There can be so much going on under the surface for your child, and your words can have a larger impact than intended. Coach Susan says, we emphasize behavior that is adoption related. Be open also to the possibility that is not adoption related. Become a detective. That's going to be a deep one, isn't it? And finally, Coach Gail says recognizing how core issues influence a child's behavior helps parents to understand and connect with the child better. Well, those are helpful tips and closing thoughts. I hope you can take that and kind of chew on it for a minute and see what best resonates with you. Well, that was quite a module, wasn't it, going through all that information? I bet you're wondering what is next. Module 6, Adoption Complexities, will discuss the important distinctions in adoption, the dangers of adoption myths, and prenatal factors matter. All right, we'll see you on the other side. Here are the references we use to provide the information included in this module. You will see that each link is clickable and can take you to an entire article regarding the material that we referenced. We hope you have a good time going through this information and come to understand the backstory because we've covered a great deal here and told you a lot about the elements of adoption. But if you want greater detail and better understanding of the concepts of some of the writers provided, you can certainly go through this list and identify the material for review. We thank you for participating in this module with us um, to better understand the process of adoption and what it's really like to adopt a child. This is our under our guidelines of adoption, attunement, parenting, and our efforts are always to grow a happier, healthier adopted family.